guys, welcome back to the Anna-losophy podcast. Last time we explored soul and discussed whether every person has one true purpose in life. And today I want to talk about another one of a favorite movie of many people, The Truman Show. I actually watched this movie when I was quite young. I think I was 5 or 6 when I first watched it. And at that time, I didn't really understand why people loved it so much. To me, it was simply a very interesting story about a man whose whole life was secretly being filmed without him knowing, and it was on TV. It wasn't until I watched it again a few years later that I realized why this film has become such a classic, even now. The Truman Show is one of the most philosophical films I've ever watched, definitely. And almost every scene raises another question about truth, freedom, identity, and reality. And every time I revisit it, I take away a very different perspective. So today, I'm really excited to break this movie down with all of you because I think it's one of the best examples of philosophy inside popular culture. I hope you enjoy. Before we get into the philosophy, let me quickly summarize the story. The Truman Show follows Truman Burbank, an ordinary man who lives in the peaceful seaside town of Sea Haven. Truman believes that he has a pretty normal life. He goes to work every day, spends time with his friends and wife, and dreams about traveling the world one day. What he doesn't know, though, is that his whole life has been broadcast as a television show since the moment he was born. Every person around him, including his wife, his best friend, and even his neighbors, is an actor. The town itself is a very big television set built inside a dome, and millions of people around the world watch Truman's life every day. So, as Truman grows older, though, naturally, there are small mistakes that begin to appear. For example, near the beginning of the movie, a state light suddenly falls from the sky, and people start behaving pretty strangely around him, and he notices that a lot of things seem too perfectly planned, and the same things happen every day. Little by little, he begins to suspect that something isn't right here. The more questions he asks, the more people try to convince him that he's imagining things, but Truman refuses to stop searching for the truth. Eventually, he overcomes the fear of the ocean that had been deliberately planted in him since childhood and sails to the edge of his world. There, he reaches the wall of this dome where his whole life has taken place. For the first time, Truman speaks directly to Christoph, the creator of the television show, who really wants him to stay because the outside world might be uncertain and scary. After a lot of reflection, Truman does choose to walk through the exit door, and he leaves behind the only life he has ever known in search of a reality he has never experienced. And that final decision is really what makes The Truman Show memorable, and that's exactly where today's philosophical discussion begins. So let's begin with the philosophical question in The Truman Show. If you discovered your whole life was a lie, would you want to know the truth? I used to think the answer to this question was quite obvious, in that yes, I would like to know if my whole life was not reality. I felt very sorry and angry for Truman the first time I watched it, and that's because his whole life had been controlled by someone else, and everything in his life was pretty much scripted, as in every relationship, every conversation, and every important decision had been influenced by Christoph, the creator of the show. It felt so inherently unfair, so naturally, many viewers wanted Truman to get away from this as quickly as possible. But the more times I've watched the show personally, though, the more difficult the answer to that question has become. If we try putting ourselves in Truman's shoes, imagine discovering that every person you've ever loved or is close to you has been lying to you since the day you were born. Your parents aren't actually your parents. Your wife has never genuinely loved you, and your best friend has pretty much spent decades reading lines from a script based on everything that they say to you. So every memory that you treasure and every holiday as well as every birthday is pretty much uncertain because now you can no longer longer discern which emotions are genuine versus which were performed for the TV show or for the people watching it. Or if there are no genuine emotions at all, then that makes it even worse. So learning the truth wouldn't be as simple as just wanting to get it, but you would have to consider the fact that it would change the way you understand your own past, and almost every memory would have to be revisited from the beginning. This question reminded me of one of the most influential ideas in philosophy. And we discussed this in a previous episode, but around 380 BC, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote the Republic. Although the book discusses politics and justice, one small section has become a very famous philosophical story, and that's called the allegory of the cave. For a quick recap now, Plato asks us to imagine a group of prisoners who spent their whole lives chained inside a cave. They can't turn their heads, which is why the only thing they can see is the wall in front of them. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, different people carry a lot of objects. The prisoners, of course, never see those objects themselves. They only see the shadows projected onto the wall thanks to the fire. Since shadows are all they have ever known, they naturally believe the shadows are reality. They don't question them either because they have nothing else to compare them to. Eventually, one prisoner is set free, and the experience that prisoner has is not really exciting at first. It's pretty painful given that he's never been exposed to sunlight and he's now exposed to it, which hurts his eyes. Everything outside the cave feels overwhelming because it contradicts everything he has believed throughout his life. He has spent years along with the other prisoners trusting the shadows, so accepting a totally different reality doesn't happen in an instant, but it happens through a gradual process because his eyes slowly adjust and adapt. And as they do, he begins seeing things he never imagined existed. Things like trees and rivers and mountains, all replacing shadows, the reality he has known. Finally, he looks directly at the sun itself and realizes that the world is much, much larger than the one he left behind. The reason this story has survived for so long and is still very famous now is because Plato never intended the cave to represent an actual cave. The cave represents the limits of our own understanding, and it can represent many different settings that relate to us. Plato believed that every one of us begins life accepting the world exactly as it seems or appears. We usually inherit ideas from the things closest to us, like our culture, our schools, our parents, and the people around us. We don't really question these ideas, at least at first, because like the prisoners, we have nothing else to compare them to. So philosophy begins the moment someone becomes curious enough to ask whether there might be something else, more things beyond what they've always accepted as true. And that's exactly why Truman really reminds me so much of Plato's Prisoner. Sea Haven is an entire reality that Truman had never had any reason to question because he's lived there for his whole life. And every morning follows pretty much the same routine, and every conversation feels ordinary too, because to Truman, ordinary is all he's ever known. He doesn't realize his fears have been manufactured since childhood, including his father's scripted death. And he doesn't realize that almost every important decision in his life has already been influenced by the creator of the show. But what's even more similar to The Prisoner is that Truman doesn't discover the truth instantly either. It's also a gradual process, and it reveals itself through very small inconsistencies that no longer fit together. As we discussed in the summary, a stage light falls from the sky, which is the first pretty much weird indicator that something is going on, and a radio begins describing his movements before quickly changing stations. His father, who is supposedly dead, suddenly appears in the street before they rush him away. So although each event seems insignificant on its own, they slowly force Truman altogether to really confront a possibility he had never even considered, that he was part of a TV show and a lot of his life was not real. That's pretty much one of the most realistic parts of the movie, ironically, because that's often how our biggest beliefs begin to change. And usually, if we've held on to a belief, especially for a really long time, we don't change them in an instant just because we hear something else. Instead, they become even more difficult to hold on to, as we see Truman discovering that his life was in a TV show instead of his actual unfabricated life. He begins to approach his life in a different way. Eventually, we reach a point where the explanation we've always believed requires a lot more effort compared to just accepting that our understanding might might have been incomplete all along. Plato thought that this process was one of the most difficult experiences someone could go through. He believed that gaining knowledge changes a person who discovers it, because it changes the way they see reality itself. After the prisoner leaves the cave, he probably cannot believe the shadows are the whole truth again, because he already saw everything. Even if he returned to the cave, he would always know that there was something beyond it, and his world has become permanently larger. This is the same thing that happens to Truman. Once he begins questioning Sea Haven, every familiar place is now unfamiliar, and he's more suspicious of everyone as well. Although nothing about his neighborhood had changed much, his understanding of it really has. And the streets where he grew up now don't feel like a natural environment anymore, obviously because it's not. And his closest relationships aren't really people he can trust anymore. Even his happiest memories become complicated because he realizes that a lot of it is a script directed by someone else. So Truman experiences a different reality because his perspective has changed. And one part of Plato's story has always interested many people. After escaping the cave, the prisoner eventually returns to tell all the others what he has just found. Of course, he has a lot to tell, and you might expect the other prisoners to really celebrate and maybe go with him. Instead, they reject him completely, and they think the outside world has confused him. Plato even suggests that they would become angry at anyone who tried to free them, because accepting the truth would require admitting that what they were seeing wasn't the truth, and everything they had believed for their entire lives had been incomplete and not the whole truth. I also couldn't stop thinking about that while listening to Christoph at the end of the film. Christoph believes that he has given Truman a better life than the real world ever could. Inside Sea Haven, Truman is safe, and nobody will actually hurt him or commit a crime against him. Nobody will abandon him because they can't, and everything dangerous has been removed from this society. Christoph doesn't see himself as a villain because in his mind, being certain about where you're in and the people around you is the greatest gift he can offer to someone else. And for a moment, I definitely understood his argument, and it's valid what he's saying, because the world outside the dome is uncertain. He even points out that relationships here are not going to stay forever. Like, you are going to fight with the closest people you, are with sometimes, and dreams don't always work out. People lie, sometimes to benefit themselves and not you, and nothing is guaranteed or predictable. Compared to that, Sea Haven offers the opposite. It's all predictable and it's secure. So I can understand why Christoph believes Truman would eventually thank him for creating such a life. Regardless of that, Truman still walks away. That decision has stayed with many people ever since the film was released, because Truman chooses a future he really knows nothing about over a life where everything is written and he can trust that something, maybe not good, but nothing bad is really going to happen. And he doesn't know whether he'll find Sylvia, and he doesn't know whether the world will disappoint him. The only thing he knows is that every decision from this point onward will finally belong to him and not Christoph. Whenever I watch that final scene, I think Truman doesn't really think about whether his choice is easy or difficult, like the red pill or blue pill situation. But I think about how much courage it takes to leave living in a world where everything is certain and everything is predictable. Plato himself believed that philosophy begins with curiosity and not being certain sometimes, because then you find out more, even if it's not a good thing. So the Truman Show suggests that living philosophically also requires bravery and courage. The courage to question everything that you've known one at a time, to follow the truth, even when it might not be the one you expected or the one you even want to hear, and to accept that genuine freedom usually begins the moment we step into the unknown. Most of us will never wake up inside a giant television studio, but I do think we can still relate to our own version of Sea Haven, about ideas. We inherit ideas about success, happiness, beauty, and even what a good life is supposed to look like. And we don't really stop to ask where those ideas come from. Did we choose them ourselves, or did we simply grow up surrounded by them? Plato believed that philosophy begins with that moment of curiosity. it begins that we stop accepting everything that we currently see as the complete picture and begin willing to search for seeing other things. What I really like about Truman's final decision is that the movie doesn't end with a happy ending, like many movies do. Although happy endings are amazing, the movie never tells us what happens after he walks through the door, and we don't know whether he will regret his decision or whether he will struggle to adjust to the real world. We don't even know whether he'll be happier than he was before or whether he'll even survive. None of those questions are answered, and there's no sequel either, and I think that's exactly the point though. The ending is giving him something a lot more valuable compared to being certain, and that's the chance to write the rest of his own story through his will. And that remained very relevant since 1998. Like, even now, technology has changed, and television has changed, and the world has changed. But the question at the center of the movie hasn't. How much of what I believe have I actually chosen for myself? And which parts of my life genuinely belong to me? And which parts have been given to me by other people? Of course, those aren't questions with easy answers, and there might not be any answers at all, but I think there's still questions worth asking. So thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Anna-losophy podcast. Bye!